Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. This is the first in a new series that we're holding by Women in Automotive Technology, or WAT, and PAVE. My name is Caitlin Magny Miller. I'm PAVE's Communications Director. I also serve on the board of Women in Auto Tech, and I will be moderating our conversation today. And because we're merging a couple of different audiences here, I want to give a very brief background on PAVE and on WAT as well. Just for those who are familiar with one, but not the other. So PAVE is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to educating the public on autonomous vehicles and their potential. We're a member-based organization, so all of the lovely women here today are representing member organizations from PAVE. We also work with tier ones and OEMs, robotaxi companies, and then safety and advocacy groups as well. And then for those of you who aren't familiar with WAT, or Women in Automotive Technology, we are a professional membership organization that offers programs for women to connect throughout the industry to really foster leadership among women and deepen industry expertise and also make connections and new friends. So today we are going to be talking about a very hot topic, autonomous trucking, and really exploring some current trends and the latest developments in the space. So I am thrilled to introduce our guests today. We have Anita Kim of Torc Robotics, Lori Heino-Royer of Waabi, and Melissa Wade of Aurora. So let's get started with some intros, and I'll start with you, Anita. But can each of you give us a bit of a background on yourselves and your respective companies?
Yeah, thank you so much. So hi, everyone. My name's Anita Kim. I'm Director of Government Affairs and Policy at Torc Robotics. So Torc develops autonomous technologies for the long-haul freight industry. We're actually a subsidiary of Daimler Truck North America. They're a leading manufacturer of Class 8 trucks. We're a Virginia-based company, and we are testing our autonomous trucks in Texas, currently with a safety driver behind the wheel, but our plan is to have commercial driverless operations in about the 2027 timeframe. A little bit about myself. I just want to say I'm really happy to be here. I always enjoy these kinds of opportunities to talk about innovation in transportation and autonomous trucking in particular. Before coming to Torc, I actually had a long career working in the transportation space in government at the US DOT. I also did a little bit of work in aviation at one point and had worked at some transportation consultancies. So definitely I've been in transportation for a while. All right, thanks.
Wonderful. All right, Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Heino-Royer, and I lead business development at Waabi. Waabi is leveraging generative AI in the physical space to bring safer and more efficient and sustainable autonomous solutions overall. We're also running pilots in Texas. I think all of us on the panel today are running pilots in Texas. We have a safety driver in the vehicle at this point. And really sort of working towards, how do we commercialize this? How do we make this something that's useful for the industry overall? I've been in the trucking space for quite some time as well. I had 20 years previously at Daimler Trucks North America.
Nice.
I did my first presentation on autonomous in 2012 and helped develop sort of like the acquisition of Torc, how it comes together, all of these things. So I've seen it for a lot of time overall, and I even spent a couple of years at Luminar on the LiDAR side. How does the technology add to it? What are the pieces around it? So I feel like I have a very comprehensive view of the industry and what we're trying to accomplish.
All right, Melissa.
Thanks, Caitlin. I just want to say thank you so much to you and PAVE and WAT for having us today. My name is Melissa Wade. I run federal government relations for Aurora. We're an autonomous trucking company that commercially launched earlier this year, and we're really excited to be on the roads in Texas between Dallas and Houston, and then Fort Worth and El Paso, making our way out to Phoenix with our vehicles. So our mission is to deliver the benefits of self-driving technology safely, quickly, and broadly. We've got 1,800 employees in 7 states across the US. I'm based here at our Pittsburgh headquarters and really excited to dive into this topic. There's a lot of really exciting things on the horizon in the AV trucking space.
Absolutely. So Anita, I'm going to come back to you here. Autonomous trucks, of course, have been in development for several years. But for our audience members who might be less familiar with this space, what is the current state of autonomous trucking? Are they on the road today? Can you give us sort of a high-level overview there?
Yeah, so I I think what I'll do is I'll just first answer your question. So the answer to are they on the road today? The answer is yes. Autonomous trucks are on public roads today. And certainly depending on which company you talk to, I think some companies are in the phase of testing their trucks, refining their technologies. Others are running commercial operations, and others are doing sort of fully self-driving operations. For Torc, what I'll say is that we are primarily testing along I-35. It's a major freight corridor in the state of Texas. We're looking to run our autonomous trucking operations from the Fort Worth area to Laredo. We actually just opened up an 18-acre state-of-the-art autonomous hub in the Fort Worth Alliance area, where a lot of mobility innovation is happening. We're looking to run our operations from that area, and we'll be planning to sort of grow and expand our trucking operations in the future. So, I mean, from our perspective, I would just say autonomous trucking is a very exciting time. There is a lot of sort of development happening. It's seen a lot of growth in recent years. And I know that we're not the only company looking at the long haul freight application. So what I'll do is maybe I'll turn over to my other folks on the panel and, let you guys speak to sort of the state of the industry.
I can jump in
Melissa,
real
go ahead.
quickly. Yeah, I can jump in real quickly. So today, Aurora is hauling freight for customers like FedEx, Werner, Schneider, Hirschbach, Uber Freight. And those commercial loads, we've delivered over 11,000, and we've driven 3 million miles autonomously. 6,000 of those since our commercial launch, driverlessly, which I'm so thrilled to be able to say. I think when I started working in this space in 2014, trucks weren't on anyone's radar. It was all robotaxi, all the time in DC, where I was based. And so I think from our standpoint, that progression to actually having those commercial loads delivered for customers after our commercial launch is really exciting. So that's our current state of play here at Aurora.
And I'll say from watching this from the inception of autonomous to sort of where it's at today, I saw it go from something people said, is it even possible, to it's real, it's happening on the roads now. And I think the other piece that you're starting to see is not only like first responders being interested, how do I engage with you? What can I do? How do I participate? And engaging instead of saying, oh, don't do it, but engaging. How do we make this work together? How do we bring things together for it? You're also seeing customers that maybe at first were shy and, oh, I want to learn a little bit, but I'm not really sure what I want to do, to aggressively saying, I don't want to be the last person to know about it now. How do I get in? How do I learn about what's going on? And so there's an absolute shift happening in the marketplace overall, from is it possible to it's here, and now how do I learn and how do I use?
Well said. Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of excitement around autonomous trucking right now, and it's really been great to watch. Melissa, I'm going to come back to you here and touch on something that you mentioned. There are a lot of similarities between autonomous vehicles like a Waymo, for example, and trucks, but also a lot of unique differences. Can you talk about some of the challenges and benefits that are unique to the trucking space?
Absolutely. And it's a great question. I think when we talk about the Aurora Driver, it's a system that we've actually integrated across many, many, many vehicle types. So the technology is designed to do the work across the space. But when you look at trucking, and the reason why the first product to market with the Aurora Driver is in trucking is the economics. When you look at it's a global $4 trillion industry, and it's a $1 trillion industry in the US. That dwarfs the robotaxi industry. And so when you think about what it means to have secure supply chains, what it means to have freight moving at the capacity that customers, at the end of the day, the end consumers, you and I and everybody on this call, want to see their goods delivered, want to have fresh produce. When you think about all of those pieces that are pressures that we all experience on a daily basis, if we can be part of the toolkit to help support our customers moving freight more efficiently, safely, at the speed limit or lower, which is one of my personal favorite hooks on this technology. And one of the reasons why I think, as others mentioned, law enforcement is really excited about the integration of this technology into the broader fleet. These are all really big benefits that folks see, but really you have to look at the size of the market. And that is one of the biggest differences I think that you're talking about. The last point I'll mention, and I think we'll dive into this with some of the conversation today, is the physicality of it. right? We're talking about a Class 8 truck, which is the big truck you drive by when you're taking a road trip or you're commuting on a major highway like I do every day. And this is obviously different than something that you as a consumer might have an app downloaded on your phone and you can call and get a ride and experience. And so that way to approach the market and help folks understand and talk about public sentiment, that's a difference. And that's something that we're working on really hard with PAVE and with many other groups that we're excited to see. We went to the Texas State Fair recently with one of our trucks to get, folks up close and personal. Touch a Truck is a ubiquitously popular activity, I think, even for small kids. When you talk about going to high schools and telling kids not only about what the technology is, but how that impacts, what job opportunities might exist for them. These are different pieces of the market that I think are important to highlight when you talk about AV trucking. That might be a little bit different than when you experience, if you're going to go order a robo-taxi.
Yeah, Caitlin, I might just add to that, I think another, and those are all great points. The other thing that I would just add in terms of the real difference between robo-taxi and autonomous trucking is that there's just very different, not only use cases, but different driving environments and roadway environments, right? So for Torc, we're doing something called a hub-to-hub concept, which means we're picking up freight at a hub that's very close to the interstate, doing autonomous driving on the highway, and then unloading the freight at a hub that's very near to the interstate. We're not going to be driving in a very sort of complex, dense urban environment that a lot of robo-taxis do. We're mostly doing highway driving, which in some ways, can be a bit simpler and more predictable. For example, when we do highway driving, it's very unlikely that we're going to be encountering a lot of pedestrians, bicyclists, scooters, crosswalks and intersections. So just in terms of the roadway environment, I do think that is a bit of a stark difference in terms of where our vehicles are going to be operating primarily when you compare to the robo-taxis. So just wanted to add that on there.
Yeah, great point. Great point. I want to kind of come back to the physicality of the trucking environment that Melissa brought up. Lori, for some people, and this came up a lot at the Texas State Fair, the idea of a semi-truck being driven by a computer can be really scary. Can you talk about how self-driving trucks are tested and how you really ensure that they're safe?
Yeah. So I'll start with Waabi's approach is a simulation first approach. So our simulator is called Waabi World. And if you think about it, the way the process works is the truck drives down the road and uses its technology, the radar, the LiDAR, and the cameras, and it picks up all the objects around. And our simulator creates digital twins of everything it encounters. So for instance, if somebody is walking on the side of the freeway, which we know is technically not legal, but we pick up every single day on the highways, we now have in our Waabi world a person that can walk, and that person can walk in any direction, in any way, in any time within Waabi world. And so we have this simulation first approach where we test everything within the simulator first, and we can go back through and track every single decision, every time anything occurs. We have traceability all the way through everything, so we know exactly where every decision was made along the way. And we have access to the logic that it's using to navigate the traffic situations. So we really have the ability to control that in a very different way. And we have the ability to understand that it will respond in similar ways. Every single one of us is a different person, and we all have a slightly different driving style. Each of our companies may end up with a slightly different driving style, but I know that the Waabi vehicles are going to drive the same because they all have the Waabi driver in them. And I think the other aspect that we need to think about and make sure that people understand is that the technology can see so much further and understand so much more than we can. So we are limited to what we can see pretty much in front of us and a little bit in our peripheral vision. With the sensors, we're getting almost a 360 view of everything occurring around us. The LiDAR can bounce under vehicles and tell us what's ahead of the vehicle that's directly in front of you. So even if you can't see through it, you can know what that vehicle ahead of that vehicle is doing. And there's just so much more information out there. And then when you add the components of the technology doesn't get tired, it's not impaired by some physical substance that it shouldn't have in its system. There are so many pieces around it that bring safety that's just not there today. And so I think that actual safety piece of what's coming with autonomous vehicles is so much stronger than what's available on the market today for all of those reasons. And I'll just go back and reiterate, that we start with simulation in our testing, and then we go to closed course and we do all the testing on closed course. And then we move from closed course to real physical highways with a safety driver. And so there's an actual process of how everything works. And it's not like we just show up on the highway and say, oh, we're going to test this today.
Caitlin, can I add one additional
Sure.
fun fact for the folks? If folks watching are really interested in digging in, on Aurora social media pages, we actually had Hirschbach million-miler drivers. So these are the safest professional drivers. Come and experience the Aurora driver. And I always say it's so much more fun to actually get to experience it yourself and hear me talk about it. But I know sometimes that's what we're limited to. The videos of the drivers actually experiencing this technology is phenomenal. They come in healthily skeptical, as some on this call might be, or your friends and family, I know mine in particular are, and they leave. It uses the turn signals. Can we teach other drivers to use the turn signals? Which, again, I know I experience on a daily basis as a driver. So I think there's these little pieces that exposure really help with, and go to, what does it mean to be transparent? What does it mean to talk about how you're doing this testing? And so the processes that each of us go through, really laborious. For Aurora, it's our safety case framework that we had to close prior to our commercial launch, to actually prove to ourselves that we're acceptably safe to be on public roads without a driver. And so I think there's a lot to dig into, and always happy to answer questions, and follow up with folks. But that piece, the Hirschbach driver video, if you can find it on our socials, is an absolute hoot, and only 4 minutes. So it's a quick watch when you're looking for something on the internet.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to link that in the recording. It's absolutely amazing to watch. So Anita, I'm going to come back to you here and sort of build on this conversation around building trust. Can you talk about Torc's efforts to engage the public and start building trust in autonomous trucking, and maybe at a higher level, what do you think the industry needs to do to garner more social acceptance of AV trucking?
Yeah, this is such an important question. And so when I think about how do you build trust, how do you earn trust, I really think it comes from two things. Trust building comes from education and demonstration. And I'm going to talk through what I mean by that. So it comes from educating the public on what autonomous technology is, how it works, right, and what it isn't. And I know PAVE, this is part of why you guys are here, and it's such a great, important effort that is so critically needed, because once the public really gets an understanding of what is sort of the technical and safety approach that companies are using, right? What you guys were just talking about a minute ago, it's a very rigorous process that the industry uses in terms of safety best practices, that all of those safety considerations are integrated into the engineering, to the safety culture, and we really do take it very seriously. So educating the public on what the technology is, what's the safety approach that we're using, and then also informing the public on what's the safety problem that we are trying to solve. I think when we remind folks that there is a roadway safety issue today in terms of the fatalities that we see every year, it's been my experience that when you really effectively educate someone about AVs, it's sort of like a light bulb goes off and they really become a huge advocate for the technology. And then frankly, if they get to experience it firsthand, via a ride along or just even seeing the truck up close, someone mentioned the Texas State Fair, at that point, they really get an understanding of what it is. And I think that trust starts to really build at that point. And then I mentioned earlier demonstration. And I think what I mean by that is that it also comes down to the AV industry demonstrating our safety success, showing the many miles that we've driven, talking about it, showing and talking about our safety record. Via the AV Industry Association, they recently released a State of the AV Industry report. You can find it online, another thing to link to. And the report said that AVs have already driven over 140 million miles on public roads safely, right? So this is just a huge number. So, as we as an industry continue to demonstrate our safety, I think if you have the education piece and the demonstration piece, those two things can really, drive that public trust building. All right.
Well said. Melissa, we get a lot of questions from the public around the impacts of autonomous trucking and workforce. How would you say autonomous trucking is going to impact jobs? And then secondarily, what sort of upskilling or reskilling programs exist to train or transition current drivers into new roles within this ecosystem?
Thank you so much for the question, Caitlin. And I think there's a world where I could talk about this for 30 minutes. So I'll try to keep it brief. But I think what I would love everybody to walk away from is kind of grounding ourselves in the moment. So when we walked through our respective roles, this technology has been in development for, let's call it in the public space, almost 15 years, right? This transition is a very healthy, long tail transition that has safety at the forefront. And so we think about the job openings that we have, particularly in the trucking industry, 80,000 plus jobs, and that number is going to continue to grow according to the American Trucking Association. And I think when you look at that gap, when you look at the amount of freight that needs to move, and you think about the jobs that have already been created in the AV trucking industry, I mentioned, 1,800 jobs at Aurora. Those are not all software engineers, right? Those are our folks that are at our terminals actually helping develop what the next generation of jobs look like around AV trucks. And those are centered, when you talk about maintenance, when you talk about repair, when you talk about actually loading and unloading the freight itself, when you think about all the pieces, you still need folks who are very comfortable around trucks. And you also need folks that are really comfortable around technology. And so when you mentioned the upskilling, I think we're looking at a world where in the next, I don't want to get this wrong, 15 years, there could be almost 500,000 new jobs in the AV space. And we've been working really diligently in the Pittsburgh region on programs to help folks, again, upskill with the technology and the sensor suite that Lori mentioned. When you think about the work in the LiDAR space in particular, Aurora builds our frequency modulated continuous wave LiDAR, which sounds really fancy because it is. But we build that in Bozeman, Montana, because there's a really strong academic base out of Montana State University. And we participate with the Headwaters Tech Hub that is working with all of the communities, tribal colleges and communities, the actual technical colleges. How do we develop curriculum that makes sure that the folks who are going to build the LiDAR of the future can actually do that and can do that in their home communities? And I think that's really important for us. I know there's a bunch of programs around the country, and I would encourage folks, usavjobs.com is a wonderful resource. It actually lists job postings that various companies have open right now. And we're really excited about what the future of this workforce is going to look like. The one thing I would hesitate to tell you is that I know exactly what it's going to look like. And I think if anybody tells you they know exactly what it's going to look like, that the sky is falling or that everything's going to be fine, like there's a healthy engagement that we need to make. And I think that's what the industry is showing, is that we need to take this issue. It's serious. People are very concerned about it. And what I really want folks to leave with, if you're a truck driver today, you are absolutely 100% going to be able to retire as a truck driver at the time of your choosing. And I think that's really important because there's been hype cycles. I was on the other side of the hype cycle when I was the chief counsel and we wrote the first federal autonomous vehicle legislation. And it was all robotaxi focused. And there was going to be 1 million on the roads by 2020. And that did not come to fruition. And so I think we want to take these conversations incredibly seriously because we know that hype cycle is there. We know that the media wants to create some of these headlines. And yet it's so important to ground the conversation in real data and really what our customers are experiencing and the jobs that we know are still open, because we need to show kids in high school and college what it looks like to work in this new economy. And so I'm just really encouraged by PAVE's participation in this, my fellow panelists and their companies. I think there's a really bright future, really exciting opportunities ahead for folks across the ecosystem.
I just want to agree with everything Melissa just said. I think anybody who's driving a truck today, you could even enter the trucking industry, as a truck driver today, and still retire when you feel like it. The sort of, I'll say, certain amounts of freight can move today autonomously, and it's going to be a long time before every amount can, right? So nothing hazardous is being moved autonomously. No live loads of like livestock are being moved autonomously. There are so many different sort of aspects. So there's that piece of it. And then the piece I want to build on that Melissa said is just like the technology side of it is so much more enhanced than where the truck is today. And so many of the younger generation is coming out saying, I want to be in tech. I want to do something more tech related. And it's opening up whole new fields for them. So there's opportunity there. It just might look slightly different. And as the world evolves every day, so will how the pieces work and how the goods move between the different destinations.
I just want to just build on this a little bit more. I completely agree. And this is such an important topic. It comes up a lot. And I do think what Melissa said, one of the most important things is to recognize that there are broader and longer term trends that are happening in the freight industry and in the trucking profession that this discussion needs to be put in the context of, right? And so Torc, we actually, work and talk with a lot of partners in the freight business, in the industry. And we do hear that, industry they say that it's tough to recruit and retain that next generation of experienced long haul truck drivers. And so, there are definitely some stats out there that say, in the future, as freight tonnage goes up and the demand for moving that freight goes up, there is this gap that we're not going to be able to fill in terms of finding the drivers to move that freight, right? And so in that broader context of trends, I think being able to have the conversation and think about the new range of jobs that are also going to be created through autonomy is something that we need to be talking about as well. So.
Absolutely. And as you can see, this is such a hot topic. We could have had one panel just on workforce development. So absolutely appreciate your insights there. And I will link to that jobs coalition that Melissa mentioned in the recording, because that's a great place to start if you're looking for some research there. I want to turn to some kind of practical questions before we wrap up here. Lori, we get asked these things a lot. In public engagements, a lot of people want to know how maintenance is handled by a vehicle without a human operator. For example, what if an autonomous truck breaks down on the highway, or what if it gets pulled over or needs gas? Can you talk a little bit about some of those logistical questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So first I'll say that I think the technology that's inside the vehicle is at a holistically different level than what you're seeing in the vehicles that are out there today. So it's if, like, let's say the example would be a check engine light comes on, right? The vehicle will be able to assess immediately, sort of like, is this something we need to get off the highway for, or is this something that needs to be checked as we get to a further location? If it's something it needs to get off the highway for, there's something called a minimum risk maneuver that there's redundancies built in for. So even if something were to happen with your main stack, there's generally a second stack that can handle getting the vehicle to a safe place on the side of a road when there is a safe place available. So that I think is built in some way, shape, or form to everybody's system that's out there. When you think about like how maintenance will work, we look at it like it will be very similar to how you get truck maintenance today. There's new components in the hardware, but the places that are doing your maintenance today will be able to do that maintenance on those pieces in the future as well. So it's not like they're getting something that's so brand new that they're never going to be able to see it. And then if something is with the software, it will be reaching out to the vendor, whether it's Waabi or Aurora or Torc, and saying, hey, there's something software related. And just like you would if there was a problem anywhere else in your vehicle, they would go through those sort of similar maintenance procedures. And then on the fueling piece, I will say, I would be entirely shocked if I ever saw one on the side of the road because it lacked fuel, because putting fuel in the vehicles is part of what its mission is, right? And being able to stop at an approved place on the route to get fuel is there. And it's one of the benefits of not having a human there. You're not going to run out of fuel because it's built into the process of how it happens. And so, you might even see that as a side benefit, that you have less obstructions because it follows its directions on every run.
I'll do one quick little plug with the Aurora driver to build on Lori's last point. we see up to 30% fuel efficiency with our driving behaviors. So as we're looking, into the future, there's still gains to be made. And I think those are also really attractive because the price of fuel is certainly one of the biggest pain points for our customers.
Well said. We are out of time. I am sad to inform you all. I have a whole slew of questions that we didn't get to. So maybe we'll look at doing a part 2. But I just want to say, Anita, Lori, and Melissa, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. It has been wonderful. And as you can tell, I could go on with this conversation forever. So for our audience, thank you for joining us. We will be posting the full video recording on PAVE's YouTube channel. So keep an eye out for that and follow us on social media. And thank you again. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.